Welcome to In the Black, the podcast that shines a light on resilience, transformation, and the power of reinvention. I'm Araceli, and each week, my co host Shannon and I sit down with incredible women who face some of life's hardest challenges, from personal setbacks to societal obstacles, and have emerged on the other side stronger, driven, and ready to make a difference.
On In the Black, we celebrate these stories of strength and success, diving deep into the journeys of women who turned pain into purpose, adversity into action, and now dedicate themselves to making the world a better place in their own way. They're here to inspire, share hard-earned wisdom, and remind us all, no matter how dark things may seem, life is cyclical and dawn is coming. So, whether you're looking for inspiration, motivation, or just a reminder that change is always possible, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to In the Black.
On today's episode, we welcome Kendra. Kendra is a resilience coach who is turning her own painful experiences into a source of empowerment for others. Having gone through 2 divorces, experienced deep betrayal, and survived the challenges of being in a relationship with a covert narcissist, Kendra has faced emotional, mental, and relational trauma firsthand. Rather than letting these experiences define her, she is using them as a field to help other women reclaim their strength and take back control of their lives. With a deep understanding of betrayal trauma, Kendra coaches women who have endured similar experiences, guiding them on their path to healing, self empowerment, and emotional freedom. Her work is rooted in compassion, resilience, and a firm belief that every woman deserves to live with confidence, clarity, and control over her own future. Kendra's mission is to help others transform their pain into power, and she is dedicated to being a supportive guide on each woman's journey to reclaiming her life. So, we're so excited to have Kendra on today's episode. Let's bring on Kendra.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're
Yes,
so excited to have you.
we definitely appreciate you coming on today. Well, introduce yourself. Tell us a little about where you are right now, what you're doing, all the good things.
Yeah, I am a certified life coach and I'm living in Lawrence, Kansas right now with my 3 awesome teenagers who keep me very busy. But I absolutely love being a teenager mom and yeah, learning to love Kansas. Been here for about 3 years and love coaching women and helping them turn their pain into something new.
Awesome. I just love your mission. I love the statement that you made when you were filling out the form to get on the podcast. So could you just take us back to a pivotal moment that was a significant challenge in your life? What was happening? How did it impact you? And how did it kind of change the direction that you were going with your life?
Yeah, great question. There's kind of a few. Um, Probably the most significant that I've honestly just started talking about. Because there's this kind of moment, I guess, that happened when I started talking about things and I started writing a blog and I started really healing outwardly so that people could see it instead of just this only inward work. So one of the most clear moments for me was when we were getting ready to go on vacation with my ex-husband, my kids, my stepkids, and um, and it was just so clear to me that what I was experiencing was abusive, and I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. I wasn't going to set the example for my kids that this is a healthy and good relationship to be in, and so that moment was one of those kind of like clear moments where it's like I can just see everything so clearly instead of being really confused, which I had been for years, and decided to do something about it.
Could you talk us through some of those details that made you aware to the situation?
Yeah, so we were getting ready to go on vacation, And I had saved up all of the money for the vacation. I had been working really hard, doing like a side gig business kind of thing, while also being stay-at-home mom to 7 kids. And and so I was really proud that we were getting ready to take everybody. I was really excited that we were going on this vacation. We were heading to Mexico for a week. And and I had gone into the house actually just to make sure all of the lights were turned off and everything was ready to go. I had found a toilet running, and so like I took the back off the toilet, stopped it from running, and I was just feeling so excited and proud of myself. Like, look what I did. If the toilet had been running for a whole week, it would have been extremely expensive, right? And so I was just feeling on top of the world. And I come out to the van and hear him just yelling at the kids and telling them that they're loading the luggage wrong into the car. Um, and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. The kids are not fully awake. And so I just came in, in this like, you can't get me down kind of attitude, just like, how can I help? What can I do? I'll help get the luggage in. Because he, of course, is outside the van, not helping do the luggage, just yelling at everybody that they're doing it wrong. And he got right up in my face in front of all the kids, in front of my parents who were there to drive us to the airport, and just said, "Is this how you're going to be?" And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but yes, let's get the luggage in the car. And he was like, "I think you should stay home." And that moment to me was just so clear. I was like, there is zero reasons why I should stay home. Um, there's 100 reasons why I should be going. And I was just like, this is just so clearly not a way that I will ever, ever, ever be treated again. And so yeah, that moment, as painful as it also like felt like a weight lifted, because I was like, okay, cool. I know that this relationship has to end. I know that I have to get free of this. And so it was also kind of like a weight lifted, um, almost like a gift moment, if you will, or at least since then I've been able to see it as a gift of like, I'd been so confused and gaslit for so many years. I was like, is this really a problem? Everybody else thinks he's amazing. Um, and that moment was just so clear to me that at least now I really do see it as a gift.
So leading into this moment in your life, um, you had never seen the signs before, but they were clearly there if your friends were saying it, but his side weren't seeing it.
Yeah, so still to this day, everybody thinks he is just the nicest human. And that's how covert narcissists are. They will choose one particular person to feed off of, to, abuse, emotionally abuse, and psychologically abuse. And they won't show that to the rest of the world. They are very much in control of what they are doing. And I was that person for him. I was the feeder who he would feed off of, and I was his target basically. So yeah, lots of people didn't see it, and because I was the only one, it feels kind of crazy making to be seeing these things and feeling these things, but not have anybody else to be able to like verify that. And so I had been seeing signs for a few years. My therapist had been telling me, you're in a relationship with a covert narcissist, but it took me a really long time actually to get to the point where I truly believed that she was right about it.
So, for all of our listeners that don't know, could you just kind of explain what a covert narcissist is versus like, you see on TikTok and Instagram, you see narcissism, narcissist, this is a narcissist, this is a narcissist. And
Mhm.
obviously, people don't necessarily know what that definition is
Mhm.
what I found. Could you kind of go through and explain some of the things that they might look for as far as what a covert narcissist actually looks like?
Yeah, and in movies and TV and everything, usually when you're dealing with a narcissist, they convey an overt narcissist, and that's somebody who will show their true colors to everybody. They're very obnoxious. They're usually kind of like this bigger than life personality and just kind of unpleasant to be around always. Um, but a covert narcissist is that they're covertly doing their things in secret. And so they're usually seen as the nicest person, the person who would give you the shirt off their back, who's always volunteering, who's like doing all of these things. And they do that on purpose. Um, to put on this show that it's like, see, I'm this amazing person. You're crazy if you think that I'm being abusive. You're crazy if you think these things are happening, because they only do those things behind closed doors and because they choose one, sometimes two people to do that to. And it's usually their closest loved one, sometimes a child. Um, and it really does make that other person feel crazy. But some of the signs, like classic things, are they ruin all holidays for you, particularly holidays that are specifically celebrating you. So Mother's Day, your birthday, even Christmas, because you are getting um, gifts and things like that. So that they will go out of their way to covertly sabotage those days, um, or any event that may be focused on you, or any good things that you're doing. They'll pick a fight the night before. They will yell at you on the way to somewhere, and then you show up and you're like either mad or sad, and they're just like, nothing happened, everything's great. And so, yeah, just looking for signs that they are treating you specifically differently than when they're around other people. And if they discount you talking about that and pointing out to them that they're treating you differently, all of those are signs that you're with a covert narcissist.
Awesome. Thank you for going through that. I know that was really difficult for me because I went through a relationship with a covert narcissist that ended with him in a police car and me in an ambulance.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting because everyone did love him and he actually used that as a weapon through our whole relationship. Nobody is going to believe anything that you say.
Mhm.
They'll definitely give the kids to me because obviously people like me better than they like you. Different things like that he would say throughout the course of our relationship. And so, but everybody loved him. And even after that happened, and he was charged and found guilty of 6 felonies.
Mhm.
Um, and even after that happened, there were still people who would come on and tell me that I was a liar and I was destroying his life. And because I mean, he's very charming. He is very handsome.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, it's nice to hear that there is actually things that you can look out for, because I didn't know. I was like, what's going on? Am I crazy? What's happening?
Yeah, and they almost always have these, like, I call them kind of like groupie supporters, who just are totally in love with them and think they're amazing, and who will often come and say, but like for today, for instance, you shouldn't go on a podcast and talk about these things. Everybody's going to know who you're speaking about. It's like, if they wanted me to tell a better story, they should have behaved better, but they didn't. And I'm simply telling the truth. And if the truth ruins their life, then they ruined it for themselves because they treated me this way and they did, in fact, do these things. And so, I mean, just for anybody else who is feeling like I'm probably in that kind of a situation and they're afraid to share their story, of course, don't do it if you feel truly unsafe, but you are free to tell your story. And when I was kind of given permission years and years ago to talk about the betrayal from my first marriage, it was so freeing just to speak to other women. It wasn't publicly on a blog or a podcast, but it was just like uttering the words out of my mouth. It's healing to do so, and so I encourage anybody to find your person or people to talk to, and really be able to use that as a tool for healing too.
So I have a very personal question, and I'm trying to think of how to phrase it delicately. Okay, having been married twice, I think a lot of people who find themselves in those type of situations, there is a history or precedence or something that causes them to find themselves in a situation where they can't continue their marriage anymore, or it is a violent relationship like mine
Mhm.
was, or something like that. When you look back, do you see patterns in your own behavior that possibly led to that situation, or like emotions that caused things to change, different things like that? Like when you look at your own healing journey, were there things that were so unhealed that you were attracted to that? Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, so two things kind of are popping into my head right now. One, yeah, I believed that I needed a man to be whole. So lots of that came from religious upbringing and things, but I just believed that I needed to be married. I believed that that was how I was going to support myself and support my kids, and so working was always felt temporary for me. And so I was like, well, it's been a year since I divorced. It's time to start dating again. And that's when I started dating and eventually met and married my second husband. So there was a lot of like religious pressure for me to get married again. Um, and if anything, that was a huge piece of me that I hadn't really healed or really understood, that I was whole um and like just perfectly fine all by myself, and that I could stay single and be happy and live a productive life and all of that. The other thing that's popping in my head is that a usually the question's asked just a little bit differently, and that question is, how did you fall prey to a covert narcissist? And because a lot of women will want to blame themselves, like, oh well, there must be something wrong with me that I got into a relationship with a covert narcissist, and they are so good at what they do and their manipulation that there really isn't anything that you can do. There, like I dated my ex for a year and a half. Like I thought for sure if there were going to be red flags, he would have shown them already, and he hid them for a year and a half. Truly, truly. And so, like if you're in that situation, listeners, and you're like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. There's not. They prey on your most like beautiful and vulnerable parts of your personality, and they look specifically for you because they know that you will be somebody who will stay with them.
Yeah, in my experience, so I've done some victim advocacy work and different things like that. And in my experience, I've found that it is the sweet, helpful, kind, beautiful souls that typically get taken advantage by narcissists,
Yep,
whether covert or overt. But that
totally.
is that is the personality type, and every
Mhm,
time they blame themselves.
mhm. Totally. Yeah, because they also look for somebody who is introspective and is willing to do like self work. They're into self improvement, or just like um, mental health is important to the victim, and that's important for them, because when the narcissist comes back and says, no, you did this and you're doing that, we're more likely to pause and take a step back and really look inward to see if it's us, which also leads us to blaming ourselves afterwards. And so it really is just taking advantage of the most beautiful parts about your personality.
So then take us through your second marriage and how
Mhm.
that, started, unfolded, and how there were signs for that as well.
Yeah. So, and maybe I'll first just say the three stages of covert narcissistic abuse, and then show where they all showed up in my relationship. So there's the love bombing stage. It feels great, right? They're attentive and loving and over the top and just amazing. There's also a lot of mirroring that happens during that time. So you'll share something and they'll be like, oh, me too, or I totally get that, or just mirroring experiences that you have. And you feel like, wow, I've never met anybody that I connect with like this. Like it just feels too good to be true. It is, but you don't think it is at the time. Um, and honestly, the love bombing is one of the most dangerous parts of the abuse cycle. It is part of the abuse because it like captures you. You think that this is what the real relationship is. And so later when they change, then you think, oh, well, they're saying if I just do something different, then we'll get back to the real relationship. And so you try for so long to change yourself and do things differently, um, so that you can get back to that love bombing phase. And it does show up every once in a while because the next phase is the devaluing. And then that goes back and forth between devaluing and bits of love bombing, back and forth until there's finally a discard, which is the third. So we dated for a year and a half, and the love bombing lasted that whole time. I lived in Seattle. He lived in Portland. It was about a 3 hour drive. So we'd see each other on the weekends. And I thought for sure I'd see something, I'd hear something if something was off. And and I really didn't. The very first red flag was just days before our wedding, and he was refusing to take a second day off work. He was going to take one day off work to actually get married, and then he wanted to go back to work the very next day. And I was like, no, we're going to spend at least 24 hours together before we both fly home to separate places because I had 2 weeks left to finish work. And I had to really push for that. Looking back now, I see that as a red flag. But that was the very first thing. The second thing was he refused to get on the train to come up and help me drive the moving van down when I was actually moving down there. It's like I can't drive a moving van and my car, and I had just been in a car accident like 3 weeks prior, so my back was hurting stuff, and he was just refusing to get on the train and come up. And it took my parents going over to his house to watch his kids and say, "You better go get on the train and go help Kendra. Like, come on, what are you doing?" So what happens is when the narcissist feels like they've like got you, so moving in together, getting engaged sometimes, getting married, like there's some event where they feel like it's harder for you now to leave. That's when they will start to show their true colors and who they really are. And that was happening right as we were getting married. And then of course after I had moved in, lots and lots of red flags start showing up. But by then he already had gotten me and I had already moved, and I distinctly remember standing outside my apartment with the moving van packed and just thinking, I should just go unload it back into my apartment. I should just stay here. And I didn't. I moved down to Oregon and was married to him for years. But I do kind of wish. Of course, hindsight's always 2020. But I do kind of wish that I had just unpacked and gone right back inside. But yeah, so we dated for a year and a half, and then we were married for 3.5 years, um, until I just had seen too many signs, until the day in the van when it's like, here I am trying to rekindle the love and really do something great for the family and take everybody on this vacation. And I mean, it's not cheap to take 6 people, 8 people to Mexico for a week, right? Like I had saved up a lot of money, and then for him to say you should stay here, it was just so clear to me that's like, okay, this will be the last fun thing that we do as a blended family. So
So when you think about this experience, like living with a covert narcissist, separating yourself from that covert narcissist, like taking everything apart. Obviously, you had a blended family, your kids had grown together. You said you were together for quite a while. When you think about that experience as a whole, Tell us a little bit about what that looked like with your other relationships, your career, your health, your sense of identity, just like what you were experiencing in that time and like some of the emotions that came up, different things that might have come up during that.
Yeah. Um, Such a good question. There was a lot going on during that time. My kids were little then. None of them were teenagers. Now they're all teenagers. And so, yeah, we had blended 7 kids, and then we also did foster care. So we had 8 kids at one time. And, um, and one of the things that I'm honestly most proud of is how I blended the kids and all of the work that I put into that. It worked beautifully. The kids are still blended. They love each other. I put my kids on an airplane all the time to go back to Oregon to see their step siblings in plays and graduations and fun and like important events and things like that. So I do still try to keep them connected. Um, and everybody blamed me, of course. All the kids blamed me. He blamed me. Um, and so that was hard because it was like the thing I had done the best was blending the kids. But I was stopping working. I had worked in special ed for many years and was stopping working to come down and be married and be a housewife. And that's all I had ever been told that I should want to do. And it's what I wanted to do at the time. And um, it it's hard being a full-time mom to 7 kids. And I actually learned then that I actually do like working and that I like having my own career and I like having my own thing going on and I like helping the world be better, whether that's working in special ed or whether that's working as a life coach helping women heal from betrayal trauma. Like I love like improving the world in some way. And so towards the end, I did get a part time job just because I'm like, I need something that's mine that I can go do and interact with other humans. And I think so. There was a lot of life kind of shifts and things happening. I also started having some health problems and things, which, I've learned now that your body actually responds to stress and things like that. And so um, I have needed heart surgery. I have gotten skin cancer. Like there's just so many things that didn't exactly add up. And the doctor's like, "Is there stress in your life?" And I'm like, "Yes, yes, there is." So there was just a lot happening, which some of that kept me in a relationship longer because when there's a lot happening, you're kind of just busy and just surviving through the days to where you don't really have time to step back and really evaluate, okay, am I going to leave? Um, and so, yeah, there's a lot happening during those 5 years that we were together.
Yeah, I always find it so interesting how our bodies respond to trauma. Even when we don't recognize the trauma, our body does.
Yeah.
And so when I was with my ex, I was in and out of the hospital quite frequently, and they could not figure out what was wrong with me. And so it's interesting looking back. And now, since 2019, I've been super healthy and I haven't had to deal with him really since 2021, even with the kids.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating to me. And I know one of the first things that we connected over was the book The Body Keeps the Score,
Yeah.
which talks specifically about how our bodies react and store trauma. And
Mhm.
um, so it's just really fascinating and I think it's awesome that you brought that up. So, can you tell us a little bit about how your upbringing? You said that you had a very religious upbringing, but how did that impact you as far as like getting into that relationship? You kind of hinted at the fact that religion kind of pressured you to get married, and then also, did it help hinder like? What parts did the way that you were raised impact leaving that situation?
Yeah, I mean, religion impacted that a ton. I had from the time I was teeny tiny human, I had been taught that to get into heaven, I needed to be married. I needed to have a husband, and so that brought a lot of like shame. The first time I divorced, it was like, well, now you don't get into heaven with your kids, and so then there was a lot of pressure to marry again because then you could like get those blessings back. And so again it was like, okay, well, I got to get married because I want to end up in heaven with my kids, and this is what I have to do, and this is just what you know good Mormon women do, is they get married and they mother and they take care of kids, and they volunteer at church and they do these things. And so I was looking for somebody where I could be a stay-at-home mom, where I could do the good Mormon housewife kind of things. And but the pressure of my eternal salvation is based on if I get married again. There's a lot of pressure to get married again. Um, and and I don't know that if, like, by the time I was in the relationship with him and started to see red flags, I don't know that it necessarily would have like saved me from going through and marrying him, just because the covert narcissist part aside. But me even finding him was definitely fueled by my religious upbringing, and the things that I was, doing religiously then.
Were there any specific events, people, or circumstances that made the situation more difficult or complicated?
Ooh, um, I mean, having the kids and having them be so well blended, I think made it a little bit more difficult. Um, there's also a term with covert narcissists called flying monkeys, and these are the people that they have convinced a certain reality. So they may tell a third party lots of things about me that aren't true, but the other person believes. And then when I come and say something else, even if it's about me, this other third party will defend him and say, that's not true. I know it's not true, even though they didn't get the information about me from me. So, and there are lots of those flying monkeys. Some were religious leaders, some were his family, some were just friends and things like that. And so, towards the end, I felt very isolated and alone in, figuring out who can I even talk to, who can I trust. And it was like my parents and a couple of friends that I had from before that relationship, um, who were like, we believe you, we will support you 100%. Like, you know, we believe that yes, it is that bad, even though nobody else sees it in the way that he interacts with them. So I think because covert narcissists are so good at winning everybody over, it creates a lot of those blind monkeys. And so people just don't believe you, and it makes you feel crazy.
That was definitely a part of my experience as well. We were in the church, and we were actually small group leaders, and very, very involved. And um, I remember just being so grateful. I had a friend named Teresa who was studying counseling and psychology, and she understood what was happening because it, I guess it just showed her one day. She was at our house for small group, and my older child spilled something, and I almost had a meltdown. I was panicked because if there hadn't been people there, that would have been cause for a rage outburst. And when she saw that, she was like, "Oh, she needs a way out." And eventually, Teresa was my way out
Mhm.
because when I went to the hospital that night, she's the one who found shelter for my kids so that they didn't go into the state care. And she's the one who found me a home in the shelter.
Mhm.
And, but having that small bit of support is so vital.
Mhm.
So let's talk to the people who could be a supporter.
Mhm.
And I would like to hear your take on maybe how they can support through that when they see things that aren't healthy without endangering that person.
Totally. Because one of the other things that happens with covert narcissists, even if they've never been physically abusive before, they can turn that way, and they will say and do things that we don't like. I would never imagine the kind of cruelty that he was to me, because that is not the kind of person I am, right? And so then looking back, it's like, well, if he can be this cruel and he can do and say these things, then how do I know he's not going to harm me? How do I know he's not going to use the guns? Like when I say, "Hey, I'm moving. I want a divorce," like is that going to be another one of those triggers for him that's going to set him off to a new level of crazy? And so yeah, advice for the Teresas and the Mirandas and Camillas in our lives, is just to, like, if you hear your friend talking to you and telling you something is wrong, even if you try to tell them, it sounds like you're in a relationship with a covert narcissist, it may still take them time. Like the victim might take them time to either one, recognize it, two, figure out a safe way to exit. And so just be patient. Like, be patient, be supportive, listen, write things down, even so that you can remind your friend of things that they've said before. I mailed my friend a note saying, in my own handwriting, that said I would never harm myself, because I was really worried that he'd try to make it look like I had harmed myself, and mailed it to her house so that if heaven forbid something had happened, I was like, please just do a full investigation, kind of a thing. Um, because of his job and his place in the community, I just knew people would probably just, you know, believe him and brush anything else aside. So just be patient with your friends, and don't get mad at them if they're not leaving as fast as you want them to leave. Sometimes it really does take some careful planning, and then be willing to be that person that'll open your doors at a moment's notice, and because they may not have planned necessarily when they're leaving, it may just hit rock bottom all of a sudden and they might show up on your doorstep. So um yeah, that's my best advice for friends.
So once you decided to leave, how did you begin your journey toward the work you're doing now?
Mm, yeah. So once I had left, um I moved from Oregon to Kansas specifically to create a lot of distance between us. I knew that if I and he lived in my hometown. So it would have been very easy to stay in my hometown. I knew tons of people. My parents lived there who are my biggest supporters. Um, so in many ways, it seems silly to move from your hometown where family is all the way halfway across the country to where zero family is. But I knew that if I stayed in town, I would be too interesting for him and he would continue to harass me. Whereas I knew that if I was that far away, it would be too hard, for just too much effort. And I knew he wouldn't put in that effort. And then it would also be extremely obvious that he was harassing me, which his perception to everybody is very important. So I had a pretty good idea that if I was far enough away and I wasn't interesting to him anymore, and it was harder for him to reach me, that he would leave me alone, and he has. Um, there's been zero contact since I left. So I moved out here to Kansas, and I had actually hired a life coach to help me process the emotional turmoil I had been through. Um, and I had been in therapy lots of different times, and therapy helped a little bit, but not all the way. And so then I had hired a life coach, and it was so helpful to me, and it helped me see the world differently and see what I've been through differently. It's very validating to the experience I had been in. And it really helped me find my own freedom, that I was like, okay, how do you do this? And I went back to school to become a certified coach, specifically because of how helpful the coach was that I had hired.
My experience with life coaching was very similar. I had been through therapy for several years. And I think the way that it is in my head, at least, is like therapy helps you deal with your past, it helps you deal with the things that you've already encountered. Whereas life coaching sets you up for the future. Would you agree with that?
Totally. I like to use the analogy of like a car windshield and rear view mirror. Life coaching, we have to look in the rear view mirror just to make sure we understand where you've come from so we don't drive down the same road again. But our main focus is the windshield, and it's bigger, and we are forward focused, and we can look to the past to understand how we got here, and also make sure we don't keep turning around and driving on the same roads. But it really is forward focused and just helping clients understand why they're making decisions, and making sure that they love their reasons for making the decisions, and just helping them kind of see big picture what is creating this future that they're creating.
So I'm a big language person. And so I'm just curious if you could go through maybe some words that you said about yourself or that you heard that impacted your mental health, and maybe some ways that you changed that and what you say to yourself now, kind of things.
Mm. But one of the things that I heard for a really long time was, "Is you're crazy." I would hear that when I was responding to a gut feeling that I had. And so I'd have a gut feeling, and I would say something, and then the covert narcissist would tell me I was crazy and tell me 1,000 reasons, and, just like come at it from all these weird angles to tell me why I was crazy. And since then, I have been able to recognize when I have a gut feeling, I'm right. I trust my gut 100%. I teach my clients to trust their gut 100%, and to really have like just more boundaries and backbone in, oh, pause. I brought up this. We're not now going to talk about 100 other things. We're going to talk about this, and then we can start to talk about these other things one at a time. But they're so good at distracting you from what it is that you have brought up, that then nothing gets solved, and they make you try to feel like you're crazy.
Did you continue with like, how did you fight that? Because eventually that voice does become your own,
Yeah.
where you're like, okay, well, evidently every time that my gut makes this feeling, that means I'm crazy. And your body and mind start to associate those things together.
Yeah.
And so when you were trying to come out of calling your own self crazy and trusting your gut, what were some steps, or what are some steps that you would tell maybe your clients, like, hey, this is how I did this, this is how you can do this? Because we tend to tell ourselves stories that aren't true.
Totally.
um and so what would you recommend as far as trying to change those stories in our heads?
So, so one of the things that I did, I mean, if we kind of rewind for a second, like 8 years prior, I had been in the betrayal trauma world trying to heal from the betrayal of my first marriage. And during that time, I had discovered journaling and learned lots of different tools and ways to journal to heal from betrayal trauma. And so, while covert narcissism isn't necessarily betrayal trauma, I had linked enough in my brain, like some of just like the feelings of how awful I felt similar. And so I went back to those skills that I had been using a decade ago, um, And at the time, back then I had written a journaling guide about how to use journaling techniques to help you heal. And so I went back to my own book and opened up my own book and was like, okay, I need to write things down. And so I would write and journal the truth about the experience I was having before going to talk to him so that I could come back and read it again and be like, no, this is for real the truth. Like, I have made sure I'm not interpreting anything. I am writing it down exactly as I have experienced it, and really being able to see that and then also see what I was feeling or thinking coming back from a conversation with him. I was like, this is just so much more twisted than I even kind of realized at the beginning. And so I would suggest writing things down and journaling. And I think in the show notes will be my links, and there's a link to get the free journaling guide, because journaling really can help you evaluate the truth of things, help you start to learn to trust your gut again, and can help you like start that path to healing.
All right, Kendra. So we ask everyone on the show this. When you think about being in the black, which means being in a positive place in your life, what does that mean to you?
Ooh. I I feel like currently I'm in the black kind of place. Um and I feel that way because I'm able to not only take my own pain and turn it into like purpose to help other people and use my voice to tell the truth of what happened so that maybe somebody else doesn't feel like they're crazy. But I also feel like when I take other women's stories, when they sit in a session with me and they tell me stories, and I can then help them turn their pain into purpose and power, that just motivates me all the more to help more women. Um, and and so like that really helps me feel like I'm in the black. And over the summer when some things had happened, I was just like, I just need to coach people. I know that I feel better when I coach. And so I had done, just like this crazy, anyway, I had offered basically free coaching to people just for a couple of weeks because I just knew for me, I was feeling so much better when I was coaching. And so that's how I stay in the black, is just continuing to take my own story and my own pain and turn it into purpose.
And where can our listeners find you?
Yes. So you can find me on the internet, and there should be the link in the show notes. Luxuryladiesretreats.com is my website. And you can also find me in the free Facebook community called Humans Navigating Betrayal, or just online, my name, Kendra Last, and you'll be able to find me. And I would love to connect with anybody who is looking for support or wants to share their story with me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of In the Black. I hope today's story left you feeling inspired and reminded of the incredible strength that lies in each of us. Our guest today has taken her toughest challenges and transformed them into something beautiful, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way to find light in the world.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and share In the Black with another woman who could use a little encouragement. Together, we're building a community of passion, purpose, and power. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and remember, your story matters. Your choices change things, and being your most authentic self can and will change the world around you.